Hey, Professor Homa back with Angus Stationery Part 2, and we're going to get into InDesign and basically lay out our letterhead. And it shouldn't take a lot of time to do this for both our letterhead and our envelope. The business card may take a little longer, but what I'm going to do is launch InDesign. Okay, and once InDesign opens, again, if you haven't done this recently, check your workspace. Remember, I like to keep it in advanced. If you go to Window Workspace, you could even reset advanced. Couple things, just remember, if you're not seeing the names here, if it's too short, you can, if you're just seeing icons, drag them out a little bit. Also, up here on the toolbar, I like to click that so I can see two columns. Also, under Window, I like to keep Application Frame activated so that you don't see anything in the background. And what I'm going to do is go File, New Document, and we're just making a letterhead, so this should be pretty simple. It's just 8.5 by 11, which is standard letterhead size. We're going to keep our margins at 0.5. We don't need any bleed and slug down here. And that's all we should need right now. Don't worry about columns. Unless you have multiple columns, there's nothing to worry about here. Just make sure it's in portrait. Facing pages we don't need, so we could turn that off too. If we had it on, it wouldn't matter because we're only making one page. And that's it. So I'll hit OK. And the only thing I really need to do here, other than adding some text, is going File, Place. And I'm going to place in my EPS file, which should be in the same folder that I was just working. Let me make sure I call this sample, and I'll go into my DTP folder. And what we're going to do, and I'll do it in between the next video I record, we should really keep our stationery items all in one folder, and I'll show you how to do that next. But what I'm going to do is just basically import this EPS file or place it. Now, you could click this anywhere. It's probably going to go up here on the center of the page, so I'll click it here, and I'll zoom in so I could see that a little better. And the first thing you'll notice when you zoom in is that it looks kind of like pixelated and very low resolution. And that's actually normal. It just means that you need to go to View, Display Performance, High Quality Display, and that's just an old setting that used to be used with page layout programs so that it would kind of save memory as far as redrawing your screen. And you still may use it if you ever did like a pick booklet that had tons of photos on every single page. It could slow you down if you had them in high resolution if you didn't really need them to. So there is still a use for that, but for what we're doing here, we could put this at high resolution, or as they call it, display performance, high quality display. It doesn't mean that this will still be fine even if you don't have your logo with it. Remember, InDesign files need to have a linked file with it. So you need to have your InDesign letterhead, which I'll save right now. I'll do File, Save As, and I'll call this Angus LH. I'll call that LH for letterhead. We'll do number 10 for envelope, and we'll do BC for business card. I'll call it LH, and I'll put my last name here before the INDD, and I'll save it. Okay, and one thing I'll mention, I'll go back here because I can do this. Now, I mentioned you want to have a folder, so I'm going to make a folder here, and I'll call it Angus Stationery, and stationery is spelled E-R-Y. And even if you want to put your last name on the folder, you can do that too. So there's my Angus Stationery. Now, one thing you got to be careful of, you don't want to move around files when they're open, because something could get messed up. Now, let me do this. I'm gonna close my file. This Angus file. I'm gonna close it just so it's not open, and I'll go back to where I have my files, and I'm just gonna put my letterhead inside the stationery folder, and I'll put my EPS inside the stationery folder, and I'm also gonna put my Illustrator file inside there. But what I'm gonna do is make another folder just called Pre-Art. I'll just call it Pre-Art. And I'm going to put my Illustrator file in my pre-art. And the reason I'm going to do that is because that's not really part of the printed piece with the letterhead. That's just preliminary art. So the one I really need for my letterhead is the EPS and my InDesign file. So I'm going to reopen my InDesign file, and it's coming back in that low resolution again. And I'm also going to check my links just to make sure everything's okay. If I would move that out of a folder and save it, just for example, let me just do this. And again, you shouldn't be doing this when it's open, but let's say I move this file outside of here, and I moved it, or let's say, yeah, the EPS. Let's say I stuck it in pre-art. I don't know if it's going to keep track, but let's say I just put it in pre-art, or I had it over here in this folder. I forgot to put it in my folder that I'm working in, and then I go here and I save this. Well, actually, I don't even have to save it right away. I get a question mark here. And what that means is there's a broken link. It means it can't find, I just kind of broke the path of where that logo is. So what I'd want to do here is, if I wanted to keep it in where it is, I could go and relink it. I could just go and find it. I could say, oh, there's my EPS, and I could just find it and hit open, and that'll go away and everything will be okay. Now that's not, for some reason, still coming up in this low quality display. But what I really want to do is make sure that I keep that logo. I'll put it back now in that same stationery folder. Now I put it back into it. Here's my stationery folder. I now have my InDesign file. There's a temp file that's in there and my EPS. And sometimes you might put your EPS or any other files in kind of like an art file or an images folder. But since we just have one, that's fine. So I'm going to go back here. And again, it became low resolution because it can't find the original. It became that way because you're not linking to the original. It can't find the original. And I'm getting the question mark. So I'm going to relink that just to kind of update it and make sure I go in that folder. So you basically want to make sure that you have any kind of linked artwork or attached artwork kind of in a consistent folder. It's easy to keep it in the same directory if you just have like one file, but if you had a whole bunch of pieces of artwork, you might want to keep a separate folder, you know, and just link them to there. And that's actually what happens when you package all this stuff together. All right, so I have my letterhead. I'm going to save what I have right now. And all I need on this is just to, you know, position this and resize it. And remember, a couple things with positioning. You can resize this thing by grabbing on a corner and holding Shift Option Command on a Mac. On Windows, it's probably going to be Shift Alt Control, I believe, and you'll have to check that. And sometimes this isn't easy, but what it does is it scales the box or the frame and the artwork that's inside. Now, if you ever have a problem doing that, you could always just do this. You could always just like make the frame bigger, you know, and make it exaggerated bigger, and just click on the artwork that's inside here, you know, and move it around to where you want. I think that's almost centered right on the page. And then you can use these percentages here to make it a little smaller or a little bigger. I think I have it like 86%. I'll put it up to like 87 or 88. That's fine. And that's another way you could scale it. You could even grab here and hold Shift, but using the percentages, that way you know that it's in proportion if these numbers are the same. Okay, so after you do that, now you don't want this like big frame and then the little inside thing. So what you could do is go to Object, Fitting, Fit Frame to Content. It'll resize the frame to fit the object that's inside. So if I do that, now they're all sized nicely. If you don't know where it's positioned, you could look at this thing over here, that little dot that's in the middle, and make sure you could see it's saying 4.21. I actually wanted it at 4.25. That would be the middle of the page, and that's fine. And what I'm going to do next is just make a text box, and I'm just going to put my address in there. I'll just put a bogus address. I'll just put, you know, 1200, I forget what I put, Memorial Parkway, some kind of Phillipsburg address I put in here. Memorial Parkway. And you could do this on one line or two lines. I'll do a space and then a bullet. By the way, on Windows, when you want to make a bullet, you hold down your Alt key and you do 0149 on Windows. On a Mac, it's Option 8. And you always want to do space, bullet, space. And after I did my space, bullet, space, I'm going to do, you know, Phillipsburg, New Jersey. And 07882, I'm not sure if that's the zip code. And on your letterhead, you also might want a phone number. So I'll just hit return. I'll put like 908 835 1212. I'm going to do another bullet. I might want to do and that's Option 8 or Alt 0149 on Windows. And you might have a fax number. You might have a website. I'm just going to put a website here. I'll put www.angussteaks or steakhouse. You know, maybe that's the address, angussteakhouse.com. Maybe that's all I need on my letterhead. And I'm going to center that. So you should have icons to center it even when you're in this character mode. And if you want to change the font, I'm just going to use something real basic that complements this. There is a serif font up here, but I'm just going to use something real simple like a Helvetica Neue Light. And you might have other things on your computer, but I'm just going to use something very plain. So I'll go down to the H's and look for Helvetica Neue. I won't use ultralight. I'll just use a light, which has a nice look. and that's like 12 point, and that looks pretty good. I'll move it up closer to the top, and there's different ways you can lay this out, and I'll put on my preview so I see how it looks, and I'll zoom in a little bit, and that looks pretty nice. That's a nice size for a letterhead, and remember, the purpose of a letterhead is to kind of send invoices and letters and things like that, so it doesn't have to be huge on here. That's a decent size, and I think it looks okay. You could print it out and see how it looks in terms of size, but that's all you really need to do for the letterhead. So I'm going to save that. And I think I'm done with the letterhead. So, and we're going to use the same EPS file for some of our other projects that we work on, but we're done with the letterhead for now.